Hi, Cynthia Allen here. Welcome back to the Move Better, Feel Better Feldenkrais Awareness Summit. And I hope by now you are in fact starting to feel better, that you're doing some of those lessons we have for you every day. And especially if you're looking then for ways to transition into more fitness options, this whole theme, this whole track is really good. This particular one, I'm very pleased to introduce you to because we have with us Angela Crowley. Angela has been teaching all over the world, and she started out in massage therapy, then went on to Pilates, went on to Feldenkrais, and more recently she's been involved in the gyrotonic method and is really one of their top instructors. And I think she's going to just give us some really interesting information here today about how you can use it even if you're an athlete, or you can use it if you're kind of a couch potato, or you can use it if you're someone who's been injured. So welcome, Angela.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Good. It's really good to have you. I'm looking forward to this. So I know you, I know you have a lot to share with us, but I think it might be interesting if we just got a little video glimpse of what in the world would we even be talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's do it. Welcome. I'm Angela Crowley here in my studio, Gyrotonic, Coral Gables in Florida, to give you a sneak peek at the gyrotonic system. Gyrotonic is based off the concept of gyroscopic movement, as all movement in nature and in our joints is actually circular and spiraling. On these handles, I can work from the center of myself through my spine and out to my extremities in fluid flowing movement that feels almost like you're in water. And if you look at these interesting cables on this machine that go from up to down, from down to up, I can pick any trajectory. What that means for you is the equipment adapts to your body. And unlike a piece of weight equipment where the end of the motion sends a shock back into the body, gyrotonic invites the body to continue lengthening and breathing and elongating, creating long, lean muscles. Now, I'm a gyrotonic educator and a guild-certified Feldenkrais practitioner, and I find the two systems couple beautifully because of the way the whole body organizes from the inside out. So on this machine, I'll work from the center of my body, the power center, out through my upper leg, my lower leg, my foot in circular pathways. I can reach from the ground up to my fingertips and down to the floor, and practicing the rhythm of my entire body at the same time. We use this work for everybody. We have people doing gyrotonic who are Olympic athletes, who are professional dancers, and everyday people who just have so much fun and love the way it feels. So on this piece of equipment, we use body weight and gravity in virtually every different plane of motion to make our bodies strong and long on every side. And over here, we have a piece of equipment very unlike any leg extension unit in a gym because of the way it lets you also work the foot and ankle and elongate the joints in coordination with how the whole body moves in limitless ranges of motion. So not only do we have everyday people who just love the way this feels coming in, we have people with spinal fusions, with joint replacements. We have people with autoimmune problems, rheumatoid arthritis. It's adaptable to virtually anyone. But what keeps people coming back is just that it feels so good to yawn through our bodies. And they walk out feeling stronger and taller and calmer. So for more information, please join me in my upcoming interview with Cynthia Allen. Thank you.
Wow, what a range of equipment, huh?
Yeah.
First of all, the equipment itself, your studio is beautiful.
Thank
But
you.
the equipment itself is beautiful. And as I see you demonstrating and talking, it gives me that, and of course, I know your background also has dance in it. So you
Yeah.
personally have a dancer's sort of presentation. But it strikes me as kind of like dancing with some constraints. You get to use the equipment, I think,
Yeah.
to be.
Yeah, and you see people that have come in off the street and you see that musicality come through in their body as a virtue of the system. If you would imagine being in water and having that sort of freedom and support, and yet having guidance at the same time, it's very fluid, almost like Tai Chi.
Mm-hmm. It looks lovely. Now, you came through an interesting pathway to this expertise in gyrotonic as an approach. So can you give us a clue about your pathway?
You bet. So I had been an elite gymnast and then a professional dancer. And I happened to be on sabbatical when I got into a very bad car accident. And no medical doctors were able to help me. I was hospitalized in interaction and on drugs. I tried physical therapy. I lost all fine motor in my right hand with thoracic outlet syndrome, and if I sat for an hour, my right leg would be numb. So they told me I would never do sports again and to learn to write with my other hand, that was as good as it was going to get. And I just didn't believe it. And so I kept searching. Unfortunately, I found a naturopathic doctor who gave me a really, really holistic orientation. He put me on a cleanse. He sent me to acupuncture. He did neuromuscular therapy on me. And he sent me to Feldenkrais as part of my rehab, and eventually to Pilates. So no longer able to dance, I started teaching Pilates and doing massage, putting those two things together. And then I started to study Feldenkrais, at which point I became really frustrated with teaching Pilates, because there's so much a whole body rhythmical organic movement in Feldenkrais, especially including movement of the middle of our bodies, the trunk, the rib cage. And I could not find a way to do that in Pilates. So I was searching and I saw a picture, which I will show you, shot from above with someone on the handled machine. And I thought, now that will get into the upper back and into the rib cage, because most people who were coming to see me, they either had neck problems or low back problems. And it seemed to me a lot of the solution had to be in the center between the two. And I just felt like the system would get me there. And the only way to learn it at that time was to go to New York and move into the studio where the creator was teaching. And it was through him that I got through the final aspects of my own healing and became able to move better than I ever had before. And I find it couples beautifully with the Feldenkrais method. So I can very readily take movements from an FI or from movements in Feldenkrais and translate it immediately into exercise. So I love that duality.
That's wonderful. And just for people who might not know what FI means, if she's talking about functional integration, and that's the private version of the Feldenkrais method, which you can learn more about in the track on Essential Feldenkrais with David Z. McPherson. So Angela, you saw that as you were doing Feldenkrais, it was providing something important for you in your healing, as did everything else, or you wouldn't have been doing it, but it was provided something important about freeing up in the thoracic area specifically, it sounds like.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And also putting together the relationships in the whole body through the nervous system, like including breath and eye movements, in generating the pathways, using ground force, for example, and feeling the wave of movement through the body. And there's a similar wave of movement through the body, which you saw in that video, in the gyrotonic movements. Mm-hmm. And that's inherent to both systems.
Yeah, so then you were obviously wanting more. You wanted back some of that more expressive part of yourself, I would imagine, that comes with doing something like dance. And so gyrotonics is really
like dancing.
Yeah,
it really
it's
does.
very much. I see it. I see that. Yeah, and then it allowed you to sort of up the game in terms of your mobility and strength, I would think, in a really brilliant.
Absolutely. I became a better mover than I had ever been as a dancer, and I only wish that I had known about it when I was dancing professionally.
So can you maybe take us on a little clearer journey of it, perhaps, with some information via some slides?
I'd love to. Yeah, let's do it. So the word gyrotonic comes from the idea of a gyroscope. So in other words, spiraling motion. And all natural movement occurs in circular spiraling motions. If you think about how the planets circle around the Earth. And the equipment, as you saw in that video, has many, many circular components. And it's this picture, a similar picture. This is actually my partner and I, but it was a similar picture of this position on a piece of gyrotonic equipment that led me to be intrigued about it, because I could see the connection to the upper body, to the back. And it gives us really direct access to the rib cage and upper back, and the arms as an extension of them. So gyrotonic expansion, meaning both lengthening our body and expanding our horizons. And the idea of system, because it's not just one part of our body. We're not just working our biceps, for example. We're always working the entire body and looking at the timing and the relationships of the entire body, and not just the musculoskeletal system. It's really intended as a system to create well-being that goes far beyond the musculoskeletal system, works the circulatory systems and the neurological systems, and just really creates an overall sense of health and well-being and being at home in one's body. So if you think of the fluidity of water and circular motion, gyrotonic provides a very similar experience in movement, almost as though you were moving in water. So all of our joints have a spiraling circular element to them. If you think of the head of her arm bone, the roundness of it, and then the movement that spirals out through her hand, the gyrotonic equipment is designed to engage with those life spirals that happen in our bodies. And the idea of creating circular power, if you think about a storm, a hurricane, a tornado, obviously circular motion is the most powerful type of motion. So, and it's also the smoothest motion, the most efficient. So with the invention of the wheel, through each of these parts of the wheel, the movement is distributed and making for a very smooth motion. And so how do we create that circular type of movement in the human body in motion? That's what the gyrotonic system does, working from the inside out. So we generate the movement from the center of the body, as historically martial arts do, from the dantian, working from the power of the center of the pelvis out through the spine and then out to the extremities. You know, core is such an overused word and so misunderstood. For me, thinking of power, this image of a dolphin is much more appropriate than thinking of just a six-pack of abdominals. It's like, how do we facilitate our whole selves from the center of the power in us? So in this movement, for example, he's moved from his pelvis, rippling like a wave through the spine and then reaching out through the limbs of the extremities. And there is a certain geometry, as we all know, in the human body and ways in which vectors and forces are most efficient. And the gyrotonic system takes that beyond just a circular idea into a spherical plane of motion. So imagine that you're in a sphere and you can reach in any trajectory, which is really what we do in daily life. So if you look at this me in this gyrotonic exercise, you'll see that I'm moving up, I'm moving down, I'm moving forward, I'm moving back, I'm moving right, I'm moving left. And there's an oppositional movement as well. So there was a wave of movement from the center of my body to get to the end of this final motion.
And I'm just going to ask for a moment, Angela, would you say that moving, not only moving from the center, but this idea of lengthening in both directions
Absolutely.
is what creates some safety?
It's what creates the safety, yes. The oppositional forces create stability in the center, which is so beautifully seen in this photograph, where the reaching back and the reaching forward, the back side of the turn, have a relationship with the distance of reaching. Whereas if the back arm were only to reach, there would be a much more stress in my body. But because the front arm is reaching, my spine is elongating through the center and decompressing.
Well,
and
I just love seeing that quality of how it connects down in through that left side of the pelvis and the right.
Exactly. That left leg is actually reaching forward as the right arm is reaching backwards. Exactly. Yep. So gyrotonic is based on natural movement, as Feldenkrais is. So you won't hear gyrotonic instructors talking about using certain muscle groups. It's more about creating an environment and imagery to facilitate the body's own natural internal knowledge inherently. And it's really meant for anybody. We work with elite athletes, we work with people who are having trouble walking, even people who are in wheelchairs are able to come into the studio and get onto the equipment. Because the principles are the same. And again, that's something we share in Feldenkrais and gyrotonic, is that the same facts are true about gravity, about oppositional motion, about using a spiral as the most efficient path of movement. They're true no matter who you're looking at. So the way we get that space and that length is through tensegrity. And I like to think of biotensegrity, my definition of it, is a balance of strength and length on any side of any joint in any plane of motion. So that's what we create space, but how do we do it? So most of us spend so many hours in a seated position, and then when we get up, often like that elderly woman in that other picture, the hips are still basically in a seated position. We're trying to stand up. So that because there's so much tightness and shortness in the front of the hips, and the back of the hips have been slack during all those hours of sitting, and form follows function. So we stand up and then we need a walker to hold on to move forward. So we really are able to beautifully counteract working on all sides of the body. And unfortunately, in gyrotonic, and unfortunately in some training systems, like even in Pilates, the position of the foot bar is like this, which leads the hips still to be in somewhat of a seated position, not a standing position, and not a position to properly propel in walking or running, because the feet are up higher than the hips. So the extension of the hip is not completed there. Whereas in the gyrotonic system, on the gyrotonic equipment, the hip can continue to become in a space where the leg is really supporting the pelvis and supporting the spine. And it's a very important distinction, so that you're training those muscles of the hip, for example, going up a stair, to be really propelling the pelvis and spine upward.
I love hearing that. That's just beautiful right there. I mean, yeah. That's such a important functional connection.
Exactly. I'm going to show you another version of that right now.
I think this whole idea of functional exercise is so misunderstood.
Absolutely.
The terms are being used so poorly, and this is a great example where you've really got the concept.
I'm going to show you another image of that. So here, again, the hip is not fully extended, right? Now, if I have this person doing this motion, their gait is never going to improve because their hip flexors are staying short, and the hip extensors, the muscles on the back of the leg that need to be strong to propel the body forward, are staying slack. They're not really being used. And what's so beautiful about this equipment is you see that strap on her foot, on one foot. She's got straps on both feet. So the equipment assists the hip flexors, so it takes over their load and then resists the hip extensors, so that they begin to fire and turn on. And we don't stop with the movement there. We take it down into full hip extension based on the ability for them to control that through the center of their body. So now this is a useful position in walking or running for the strength of that lower leg to propel the body forward. So we have all kinds of great ways of working on gait. And here's a lovely woman enjoying her gyrotonic session. She's doing chemotherapy and she comes twice a week. And she hates exercise, but she loves gyrotonic because she feels like it's so much fun. So she never misses a session. So we have lots of ways to work on gait, as she's showing us there. And then you'll notice that these three people doing the same exercise all have different positions in their bodies. And that's the freedom the cable allows for each person to find their own best trajectory and their own home in their body through the exercise. So the equipment doesn't dictate the position of the person doing it. So if someone's, for example, bow-legged, they're not restricted by that. They can find their own best path of movement with the freedom of the cables. So again, going back to that idea of tensegrity and wanting to get equal strength and length on all sides of the body, how do we go about that in the gyrotonic system? One of the ways is we work, for example, this exercise in different positions. So we can work it on the side, we can work it on the stomach, and working on, so we change the relationship of gravity with gravity into all different planes of motion. So we thereby get strength and length on all different sides of the joints and all different sides of the body overall. Another, there we go, taking it into a little bit more challenging plane of motion. And on this piece of equipment, you'll see she's working on a gait, a running motion turned sideways. And I want to say something about this client because of her ability to do this. So when she has an autoimmune disease, and when she first started with me, she had, her hands would be purple and she had so much swelling in her hands that she could not even hold the straps. And now she's able to look at her fully weight bearing there and able to work on dynamic running and keep her cardiovascular system strong. So this is an example of working a gait or running motion to the side. And we also flip it over.
That's pretty incredible. It's beautiful. Yeah.
So working on all sides. And working on the push off of that back leg, which is so important for a dancer to propel themselves into a leap in the air, or for a runner to really have an elongated gait as well. So we have lots of different ways at working with gait. And that the thing we're often dealing with is the patterns people use either all day long in their daily lives, like sitting in this folded position, or overtraining, one muscle group over another muscle group. So again, form follows function. So if they're training that way, you can see the problem in this diver. This diver is a diver I worked with, and she's now a gyrotonic instructor. But the muscles have overpowered the line of force through the skeleton. And the same thing happens with people sitting for hours on end. So this is a former attorney getting a chance to let her spine open up and breathe and let her heart open up as well. And here's a mom with 3 very young children. Again, she spends a lot of hours carrying children and in a folded position. So here's another look at how we help one to unfold. And this is another attorney who, when he started with us, he was getting injections in his back every few months like clockwork, no longer so. And he just can't wait to come in and get off of his desk and open up his body. And it's reduced his headaches, it's reduced his stress. So I'm wanting to share with you that this is for all different kinds of people, and we can adapt the system for all different kinds of people. Going back to that idea of a spiral as the most efficient pathway of movement, it's also the way we get the most length. So like there's that silly exercise of standing in front of a wall and walking your hand up the wall to see how much range you can have in your shoulder. But if one were to just spiral the body as the arm reaches up the wall, it will go much, much further. So the use of a spiral is ever present in the gyrotonic system. So there should be a normal spiral and counter spiral in gait and in running, which is often missing. And we have lots of ways to play with that. So here on a piece of gyrotonic equipment, we're putting the pelvis in a more stable position so that there's less movement of just turning of the hips and more access to spiraling and sharing that through each part of his spine in this motion. So we want to distribute the load of the turn, distribute the amount of turn at each different segment of the spine, so we reduce stress at any segment of the spine. And we can take that into a variety of positions. So here we have a standing position. You can think about your golfers. So, many people are concerned about, well, what if doesn't all this range of movement create hypermobility? And I think it's important to talk about a number of different types of hypermobility, because sometimes hypermobility is just at one particular spot, like in a golfer in the low back, only turning from 1 or 2 spots of the low back. And in this picture, you can see that the turn starts down at her right foot and is shared and distributed all the way up through her chest, and the arms are following through on that, versus it just being shared by one spot.
I was thinking when you were showing the pictures of hip extension, as somebody who has hypermobility in my knees, I thought, boy, that looks like a really great way for me to injure myself.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because what you have hypermobility where?
In my knees. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
we could easily put the strap above your knee.
See, that's gold right there for somebody here.
Yeah, this is phenomenally adaptable, this entire system. Mm-hmm. And I'm so glad you said that. It's like somebody came to me and said, my doctor said I shouldn't do gyrotonic for my knee because of having a 30-pound weight attached to my foot. And that's so taken out of context, Mm-hmm. So I'm really glad that you brought forward that question. So, it's very easy to think of ballet dancers in terms of hypermobility through an entire system versus just 1 or 2 segments. So what you can see that there are cables attached around her hips. And what that's designed to do is to awaken and to stimulate her own internal connections for her to find her own source of equilibrium. And we can have her in various relationships with those straps so that it gives her a feedback so that she finds her own equilibrium and her own sense of balance. So here's another example of a way of dealing with a very hypermobile person. She also is a ballet dancer. So if we start in picture 1, I'm only going to let her go out towards picture 2, to the extent that she can come back to picture 1. So that she has to stay connected, and she's using the ground force and pressure against the straps to keep connected at the end of her range. So from picture 2, she is engaged still with the ground force and with the straps, so she's not falling into her joints and injuring them. So that activity at the end of the range of motion is also a protective mechanism for the joints. So we seek in gyrotonic to help each person find their own unique balancing point through their own system. So whereas some schools of thought would put a person in front of a grid and try to make their body fit into balance on a grid, in gyrotonic we respect that no two torsos are the same, and seek situations that allow one to discover their own sense of balance. So here we have back to this woman I showed you earlier. What she's standing on rotates, so she can rotate back and forth with a bent leg, a straight leg on both feet, on 2 feet, and that motion thereby gives her more reference in terms of her balance. Another misconception about gyrotonic is that it's nice because someone will see fluid movements like I showed you in the video, and it looks like it's not that strengthening. It's just sort of fluid and nice. And I'd like to introduce you to Kirsten Voller here, who came to me at first. She had retired from sports. She had been told she has a herniated disc in her low back and deteriorated articular cartilage in her knees. And she was told she had to stop all weight-bearing sports. She gradually became able to go back to swimming and running and eventually competing, and she became Xterra world champion. And the only form of strengthening she used was gyrotonic. So if you were to watch her running, she runs like a spring, and like each joint is just acting like a shock absorber and propelling her. And her hips have this really nice figure 8 dance, and so do her shoulders. So there's no shock to her joints.
She looks like a spring. I mean,
right? You can see it. Yeah.
Absolutely, you can see it, and she's clearly got strength coming through that springy system.
Exactly. Here's also an Olympic pole vaulter, and I worked with him to help recover he had a fall in a climbing gym just a few months before an Olympic trial. And so we had to both work on getting his shoulder reintegrated with his movement and connect that to the rest of his body again. And here's a diver I worked with. She was an Olympic diver on the US team. And if you look at the position of her neck, you can imagine that when her head hits the water, it doesn't feel very good through that neck. She was having a lot of trouble with neck pain when she first came to me. And we can very easily simulate motions from sports and getting into them and out of them and refining the technique to do so. So here's working a push-up with motion so that We don't do stagnant movements. You're always moving into and out of a motion with, again, that spring-like quality to it. And we like to work at all different angles, so we prepare the body to have strength moving in any given direction. With flexibility being equally as important as the strength. So stretching actively, in that he has cables on his hands he's pushing into, and he's pushing his hands into his feet. So he's not just falling into a stretch, he's actively engaging and pushing actively backwards, if you will, in towards his back. So there's a space between his torso and his legs, lengthening equally the entire backside of his body, as opposed to one piece greater than another. Going back to that spiraling shoulder, another area in which I think the gyrotonic system is particularly unique is in its approach to shoulders. So many systems, unfortunately, still teach that the shoulder blade should go in the direction of the red line when moving the arm, that it should retract to keep the shoulder safe when the arm is moving. The gyrotonic system and equipment encourage that shoulder blade to glide in the direction of the green line, so that it's a circular motion that is rhythmical and integrated with the movement of the spine, with the neck, and with the arm, so that you get to work on the rhythm of the glide of the shoulder as well. Just like with the hips, I think that's one of the finest aspects of gyrotonic.
Sounds like it has a lot of the characteristics we use in Feldenkrais, where you're
Absolutely.
really exploring timing and sequence and really
Absolutely.
getting down to the more minute details of that.
Absolutely. And the timing, the rhythm, really makes or breaks everything else. The pathway of the movement, the strength, the flexibility of the movement. If there's not that timing of the force moving through from the feet, through the pelvis, through the spine, out through the limbs, then there's going to be stress somewhere if the rhythm isn't there. And once the rhythm is there, the bodies begin to dance, they begin to sing. And if you walk into a gyrotonic studio, you'll see the movement is appearing like they're dancing. It's so very, very fluid in the system. So, and we work on lots of different varieties of coordination at the same time, challenging the body so that we don't do the same workout again and again. We're constantly varying the positions with the expectation. So it's required that the person is aware and thinking about what they're doing and feeling what they're doing. We have just thousands of possibilities in the studio. So here again, speaking of shoulders, this is that pole vaulter, and we had to get after he had shoulder surgery, there was a lot of tightness around his shoulder, and so I worked in ranges where he's active here. He's not passive. He's not hanging on that shoulder joint, but where he's actively working back and forth to help free the restriction of tightness in the shoulder post-operatively. But it's perfectly safe. Even though it looks like it would be risky for a shoulder, he's perfectly safe because of the engagement that's going on at the same time.
I think that concept right here would be hard for many people to understand. And so I'm sure, like, for example, this is not one of your first things that you do with him, right? This is something you built up to, that you had
Right.
confidence in his ability not to hang on his shoulder joints.
Right.
And he had confidence in his ability not to hang.
Right. And the other thing, I mean, I did things right away with him that he thought he couldn't do intentionally, because one of the biggest challenges is getting over the guarding base from fear that goes on post-operatively. And when you've got an athlete heading towards competition, you have to break through it. And there, as we do in Feldenkrais, worked on moving the rib cage around the shoulder so that he could thereby do things he never thought would be possible with his shoulder. And it made him just laugh, he would just crack up because he didn't think he could do it when I would show him the movement. But then I'd teach him the trick. You're actually not moving your shoulder, you're actually moving your rib cage around your shoulder. And so using all the parts around except the injured piece to create the same movement, just starting from a different point of view. So instead of moving the shoulder joint, teaching him to move his body around his shoulder and thereby reduce the stress on the shoulder. So here we have, again, my client just having lots of fun playing with different movements, and it makes her so happy. The gyrotonic work in the studio is a lot of fun, and that's as important as anything else, because when people are having fun, they're attentive and their learning is exponential compared to if people are doing something repetitively and just with their mind instead of being in an environment where they feel that it's playful. So just to help you understand that gyrotonic really is for anybody, this particular gentleman has a fusion in his spine through his entire lumbar spine, including his sacrum. And he has one full knee replacement and one partial knee replacement. So some people would be worried about someone with spinal fusion doing so much spinal movement. But we can set up the equipment, as you can see, so that it's encouraging the movement way up above the fusion between his shoulders. And the more I can keep him mobile there, the more freer he is in living his life and keeping the stress off the lower part right above the fusion.
Excuse me. So what you're referencing is there's a fear not a fear, an actual reality. Once somebody has had a fusion, the level above the fusion or the level right below the fusions is
at
susceptible to needing to be fused sometime in the future because it will take up too much of the motion. So you're saying you can actually structure the equipment so that you can really take the focus of the movement several levels away from that area.
Exactly. So he's a very tall man, and you'll notice that I've put that machine up so it's not down below him as it would be on another person. And I've got him in a seated position to stabilize his pelvis. So I need to get his upper back between his shoulders as free as I can, so that when he's reaching and doing daily activities, he's not overstressing that level below that's right above the surgery.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, same guy, same machine, here working on his hips. So he has a spinal fusion, low back pain, and as well as knee problems. So what's between the two? The hips. So I do a lot of hip work with him, substantial amount of hip work with him. And there he is doing his leg work. So you'll notice I positioned him on the floor, not on the machine where the leg could go into a position of greater extension like I showed earlier with the girl in pink tights, because I don't want him to extend his lumbar spine. So I put him on the floor so it blocks that from happening. And then his granddaughter is on the other machine working on her strength and hanging and playing around.
Oh, that's lovely.
It's fun. So again, the movement moves from the center out through the extremities as martial arts do, as Tai Chi does. And that creates a flow that reduces the stress at the end of the movement. So what do I mean by that? So in this tennis player, it looks to me like when she hits that ball, her elbow is going to take a lot of the force of hitting that ball. So that would be the opposite of moving from the center of the body. I'd like to see the power of hitting that ball start down around her pelvis and connect through her rib cage. And that way, the arm and the hand can be the finesse at the end of the movement, not the power. So the power is really from the center of the body. And then the wrist and hand are just for the finesse of aim at the end of the motion. So the ends of our bodies should be free. But the gyrotonic system, like any other system, could be taught poorly or taught well. And you could do gyrotonic or Pilates or any other system, like he's doing it in picture one, and those are the results you're going to get. Form follows function. So how you go about doing it is really essential to getting the result of him walking out the door more like he is in position one or more like he is in position two. And therefore, this is an instructor training for gyrotonic. So the instructor training is quite involved. And the trademark is very well protected, and that's to ensure the quality of work that the public receives with gyrotonic.
And Angela, you're one of the top instructors in the gyrotonic approach, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, that is a question that I would certainly have that we can talk about in a minute. Is I think that you're presenting a really high level of skill that you're talking about as you work with clients. It's like anything, there's different levels of training. And then, as you said, still, you can turn out to do anything badly.
Right.
You know, there's, you know, you try to guarantee that you have the right instructor for the right person, but the two people may or may not manage to pull out a quality result together. Although I think probably most of the time people will, but yeah, it's important to realize.
That's right. That's right. I mean, you can have an ideal exercise, and if it's executed improperly, then you're not going to get an ideal result. So the reason I show this picture is because I love the calm and alert preparedness in this beast. And that's what we seek to create in the nervous system with gyrotonic, so that there's a sense of calm yet preparedness. So people leave the studio and they feel more alert, they feel more clear in their thinking, but they also feel more relaxed, and they're also smiling a lot more easily. So it's really about something much more than just a workout. And as I said, it's really for everybody. That's a professional ballerina and a woman who has had multiple health issues, and she does not look like a person you would see typically in a gym, but she loves opera. So whenever she comes in, I put on opera, and she moves as fluidly as the ballerina. It's really beautiful. So there you go, the gyrotonic system.
Well, that's beautiful, Angela. I really appreciate that. And I think, you know, there were so many moments that I thought about the parallels between Feldenkrais thinking and your thinking. And I have to say that while I appreciate Pilates, I appreciate other forms.
So do I. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's often for Pilates and Feldenkrais, I feel like there's often like moments of, oh, okay.
That's exactly
you know,
what led
and
me.
I'm not
It's
I'm
just
not quite hearing those yet in this anyway, and I appreciate that. And one of the reasons I think is because of this spiraling, appreciation
yes,
of the spiral of the movement, which I
yes,
find is something that's highly underappreciated in almost all systems, and something that Feldenkrais really got. Oh my gosh, all these bones, all these
yes.
joints spiral. And the way that we pick up an arm, the way that we help people explore is always coming back to that spiraling sense. And that's really how I think joints stay, one of the ways joints stay safe
Yes.
is you follow the path of the spiral.
Absolutely. There's far less wear and tear than if you just move it back and forth at a right angle. It's going to wear out much more quickly, and you don't have all the sides of the joint participating.
Mm-hmm. And the other piece of then that we already talked a little bit about was this grounding that you're doing, this grounding and this oppositional forces that you're particularly interested, the active engagement that you're particularly interested in. So I
Yes.
can see how those can all come together. I wonder for people with scoliosis, what are you seeing for that? I know some, women with some pretty severe scoliosis later in life. I'm kind of curious if this could be a way for them to explore fitness.
Yes, the gyrotonic system is really beautiful for people with scoliosis because of its adaptability. For example, as I was describing, the cables have the ability to be in different positions with like the right hand and the left hand, or the right leg and the left leg. And we work from the balance in the center of the body out, instead of trying to get the outer ends of the body to conform to a piece of equipment. We work from the balance of the center out, and then the equipment provides feedback through their system that helps them find their own internal connections to discover their own equilibrium.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Well, Angela, I feel like that we've gotten a really big education here. I can't imagine that there's a huge number of instructors in the world.
There, I think over 7,000 now.
Oh,
Maybe.
wow, that's
Yeah.
pretty good.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And I know we have a studio here in Cincinnati, so I'm going to be checking it out myself, and I encourage other people to check it out. And I think that, of course, people are not usually going to find someone who does both Feldenkrais and gyrotonics, and I am sure that your Feldenkrais background helps you.
Absolutely. It's underlying my thinking in everything I do. Yes.
Yeah. So, but nonetheless, I still think it's worth for people to check, even if you can't have Angela. We can't all have Angela.
Well, there are inherent parallels, so you can trust that, and I think where there's truth, there's truth. Like in the integrity of how a body moves, that is there in Feldenkrais, is there in gyrotonic, so that you can trust.
Thank you. That's nice. Hey, do you have a little giveaway for people that might be interesting?
I do. I have an offer of 10 tips for how to apply tips from the Feldenkrais method to your training system.
So whether it's gyrotonics or something else, they could use these 10 tips.
Yes.
Fabulous. I think they could be very helpful. I think that's one of the struggles, is for people to make the transition from a Feldenkrais approach, and then they go like, well, how do I go back into my regular whatever?
I agree.
Yeah, beautiful. I love it.
Yes, yes, good.
Is there anything in your life that's inspiring you right now? Maybe a special quote that you could share with us?
It's a quote actually I used during the presentation, which is form follows function and function follows form. So what we do creates the shape of how we are. And I love, even though that's a quote from an architect, I think it's very applicable to our bodies, in that the form that we're in all day long, whether it's seated slouched over a computer, or if we're choosing to unwind that and spend more time moving freely, that's going to ultimately determine the shape our bones form and the posture that we carry. I have another quote if you'd like to hear it, which
Sure.
is that a quote from a ballet dance teacher of mine, and she said that people think they can't change their bodies just because of their bones, but look what a little water did to the Grand Canyon. So just knowing that even though one walks in with the shape of their posture, their bones as it is, that there's a potency to gentle movement that can change that over time.
A potency to gentle movement that can change that over time. I like that, Angela.
Good.
I like that a lot. Is there anything you want to say as we wrap up? Anything missing?
You were asking, you mentioned coming back to something about training, about the training process, the educational process.
Yeah.
So it's a well-governed process in which people learn to do the movement work in their own bodies first. And then they take a course where they learn to do, they learn the fuller curriculum and the hands-on cueing. And then they have to apprentice a number of hours working on that. And then they come back for a review session. Then they go out and do another like 30 hours of practice time. And then they go to a final licensing certification. And that's what, and I'm one of about 14 people around the world who handles those. So it's a final point at which we look at what they're doing and decide whether they're ready to go out there and teach people or not. So it's nicely controlled. And then they're required to do continuing education every 2 years. And there are a variety of courses people can attend that include therapeutic applications. And I teach a course called Pathways of the Shoulder, Hip, and Spine, which is greatly influenced through Feldenkrais.
Wonderful. Good. Well, I want you to click down below the video on Angela's giveaway. That's going to not only give you ways that you can improve, using those tips, improve whatever fitness path you've chosen, but it will put you in connection with Angela so she can share other things with you if you like. And, you know, she's got a lot going on with a lot of workshops all over the place. So there's such a wide range of people who watch this. So there's no doubt in my mind, there's some people who are already saying, you know, I got to find an instructor. And there are other people who are saying, I need to become an instructor. And so either one, you can probably connect through Angela to get more information that way. Angela, thank you so much for being with us today. I really enjoyed this. It's fun to have this topic, really.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm just thrilled. So happy to share it with the world.
Yes. Yeah, I'm glad. I hope we can expand its reach a bit more through the summit. I think we can, and I appreciate your connections back into the Feldenkrais work as well. So for Angela and myself, we're going to say goodbye, and we'll see you soon at one of the other items. If for some reason you're saying to yourself, I cannot manage to watch all these sessions, well, that means, of course, that you are a person with a life. That's what it means. So if you want to see more of the sessions, then you can support Summit and get your money's worth by purchasing the All Access Pass. During the Summit, you get an additional discount that goes away once the Summit is off, is done. So now is the time to do it. And then you get to watch any of these things as long as you want to do any of the movement lessons that you want. You get this great book on how to take notes, on not how to take notes, but prompts and ways that you can take notes for the Summit and keep track of them if you would like, an ebook. So many great things in the All Access upgrade if that's calls to you. Okay, thank you so much. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.